All right, okay. Welcome to the second lecture. So, in the second lecture, we are going to cover how to prepare the journal format, of the paper. Okay, so we are already done with the psychology of research writing. So, we are going to begin right away. Let's go into how you can prepare the journal format of the paper. Okay. All right, so let's look at the structure of a research article. Okay, the structure of the research article. So the structure looks like a fish. Okay, we have a small end there, we have a small end there, and we have a big body in the middle. So it begins with the abstract, and then it begins with the title, then the abstract, then keywords. Okay, so for these three, we say that make them easy for indexing and searching. So they should be informative, attractive, and effective. Okay, they should be informative, attractive, and effective. Okay, then we come to the main text or the body, which is also the IMRAD, which is introduction, the method, the results, and discussion. So here, this is what you have to bear in mind. Okay, so the journal space is not unlimited, and then your reader's time is scarce, and therefore make your article as concise as possible. Okay, more difficult than you can imagine. So, Imrat says that look, the journal has very limited space, and then your reader that has not got all the time you think. And for that matter, you have to make your research as concise as possible. Okay, so the last part is the conclusion, the acknowledgement, the references, and then if ever you have supplementary data or appendices you can add. So that is how it looks like. Okay, let's move on. So here we are going to look at the detail of we're going to look at the functions of the various part of the Emirate style. So the introduction, that the question is, what did you or others do? Okay, why did they do it? Okay, so the introduction tries to answer this. Okay, so in other words, what is interesting about your studies? What is interesting about your studies? Okay, so the introduction will try to tell why your study is interesting. What is it that you are trying to do? The methods, okay, we'll talk about how did you do it? Okay, so what did you do? The introduction. The method talks about how did you do it? No, how did you do it? The results will talk about what did you find in your study? What did you find? Okay, and then the results. Now the discussion answers these questions. What does it all mean? What do you have found? What does it all mean? Okay, so the main text is followed by the conclusion, the acknowledgement, the referencing, and then the supporting materials. Okay, so basically that is a summary of what the Imrat style is all about. Okay, so we are going to pick them one by one, and then we'll discuss them in a little more detail. So the length of the manuscript. Always look at the journal's guideline or for authors before you start preparing your journal paper. You always need to look at the journal's guideline. So somebody was asking, where do I find the journal guideline? Okay, what you need to do is to go to the journal website. When you are there, look for guideline for authors. Okay, and then you can find the guideline. Okay, that should be perfect in guiding you. That should be perfect in guiding you in writing your journal paper. However, an ideal length for the manuscript usually is around 25 to 40 pages, double space, okay, including essential data only. So 25 to 40 pages, which is double spaced. Usually if it's single spaced or 1.5, it's between 15 to 20, between 15 to 20 pages most of the time. If it's single to 1.5, like that. So these are some general guidelines. Okay, so your title should be short and informative. Your title should be short and informative. Okay, your abstract should just be one paragraph. But again, this also is dependent on the journal because I have seen some journals. I remember one journal that we submitted a paper to way back in 2018, Malaysian Journal of Instruction, something like that. Okay, in that particular journal, the abstract is not written as one paragraph. The abstract is written with subheadings. For example, the introduction, you have to indicate what is the introduction. You have to indicate what is the purpose. You have to indicate uh, what is the method, indicate the results, and then the conclusion. Okay, so this is also dependent on the journal. Okay, usually the abstract should not be more than 250 words. Okay, your introduction should not be more than 2 pages. The introduction should not be more than 2 pages. Okay, the method should not be more than 3 pages. Results not more than 6 pages. Discussion not more than 6 pages. The conclusion should just be one paragraph. Okay, this is also dependent on the journal. Yeah, I remember. I think just last week we submitted a paper to one Philippine journal, okay, which is chair accredited. And then actually I was surprised. It was the first time I noticed that the conclusion is just like the conclusion of a thesis. I didn't really like it, but that is what the journal likes. So I just have to follow their instruction because the conclusion is about 6 paragraphs, which is crazy. However, that is what the journal requests. So if you want them to publish your paper, then you will really need to follow their guideline. Simple like that. Okay, the figure should not be more than 8 pages. The table should not be more than 3 pages. And then the references should not be more than 4 pages. Ideally, your reference should be like 2 to 3 pages. 2 to 3 pages. The number of references should not exceed 50 references. Okay, so get note. Don't put in too many references. It doesn't make your work look good. Okay, so steps to organizing your paper. Okay, so let's assume that, look, your dissertation or your thesis is ready. Okay, and then you want to uh, prepare it into the journal format. Where do you begin? Where do you begin? So you begin by preparing the figures and tables. You don't begin by writing abstract or writing the introduction. No, that is not how it's done. The first thing you do in preparing your journal paper is to prepare the figures and the tables. Okay, number two, when that is done, you write the methods and then write the results and then the discussion and the conclusion. Then you can now write the introduction. Okay, when that is done, you write the abstract and then the title and then the keywords, then the acknowledgement. Okay, and you write the references. Okay, so now let's go deeper into how to do them. Now, figures and table, which is the first thing you do in preparing the journal paper. Okay, number one, decide how your data should be presented. You have to decide, are you going to use tables or you are going to use graphs? Okay, so it depends. Okay, or maybe you want to use chart and so on and so forth, or you want to use text only. Usually for qualitative study, you are going to use text like that. But for most quantitative, you are going to use tables and graphs. But even this, it depends on what you are trying to accomplish. Okay. So remember that a figure is worth 1,000 words. Remember, a figure is worth 1,000 words. Okay. Number four, your data should be your data are the driving force for the paper. Okay, so your illustrations are critical. Your illustrations are critical. So make sure that your table are well done. It looks nice, it looks beautiful. Okay, now let's try to compare tables with figures. So generally give the actual experimental or survey result. Okay, so they give tables give the actual experimental or survey results. However, the figures are used for comparison of experimental results with those of previous works or with calculated or theoretical values. So if you are trying to compare various components of your results, okay, then you can use figures. Okay, you can use figures. But if you are trying to just uh, show your results, then it's better. If you are trying to emphasize the numbers, then you have to use the tables. Okay, this is just a basic differentiation. So make sure no illustration is duplicated. Okay, don't duplicate any kind of information. Don't duplicate any table. Don't duplicate any figure. So none should be duplicated in the manuscript. Number seven, another important factor. Okay, figure and table legends must be self-explanatory. So usually we are going to provide legends, okay, for the tables and for the figures, and make sure they are self-explanatory. Okay, make sure they are self-explanatory. Like an example of the same data presented in uh, figure and presented in a table, as you can see here. Okay, so I'm saying here that, look, if you are trying to stress the numbers, then use table. If you are trying to compare the result, then you have to use figures. Okay, appearances also count. Okay, so avoid crowded plots. Use well-selected data. Avoid crowded plots. Use well-selected data, selected scales. Okay, so think about the size, think about appropriate axis label size, and then include clear symbols and data sets that are easy to distinguish. So as you can see here in this figure, you see the plot is very crowded. It's not really clear, it's messed up. And you don't want to have anything like this in your paper. You don't want to have anything like this in your paper. Okay, so never include long boring tables. Long boring tables. Okay, so if you have any kind of table which is very long, it's better to send it to the appendix instead of including it in the results because it doesn't make your work look good. Okay, now use of photographs. So if you have photographs which is colored, it is better to make it black and white, especially if you are submitting your paper to a printed journal. If it's not an online journal, if it's a printed journal, then better use black and white. Okay. However, if it's just an online journal and it's not a printed journal, then it doesn't count. Okay, you can use color. It's okay. So in this image here, it's just the same image. On the left, it's colored. So instead of making it colored, you can make it black and white, like what you find on the right. Okay, so in this case, you are going to save a lot of money because usually if you submit your paper to a printed journal and then they are colored images, they are going to charge you uh, some more money because it costs more to print colored images than to print black and white. Okay, let's look at decimals and lines. You must pay attention to the use of decimals, okay, and lines in the table. So your decimals must be consistent. Okay, so use consistent decimals. Okay, before that, let me say that usually in making tables, in the table up here, it doesn't look good for publication. So you should remove the lines. Usually for journal publication, your table should have just 3 lines. So 1, 2, and then 3. My image here did not show the last line, but there should be 1 line beneath the numbers. So 2 lines up and 1 line down. So only 3 lines. Only 3 lines when you are making the table. And instead of adding percentage to all the numbers, you can just add a percentage to the heading here so that the numbers will not look so messy with percentages everywhere. Okay, and then like I said, the decimal should be consistent. Now let's go to the methodology. So step 2 answers the question of how the study was conducted. How the study was conducted. Okay, so you need to include detailed information so that the reader can reproduce your study. Okay, do not repeat the details of established methods. So use references and supporting materials to indicate previously established procedures. So if you adapt a methodology, make sure you include the references. That's very important. You should always make sure you include references. Okay, so reviewers will criticize incomplete or incorrect method descriptions and may recommend rejection because this section is critical in the process of reproducing your investigation. Okay, so make sure that your methodology is done well, it's well written, so that whoever reads it, okay, he can do the same study using the method you have prescribed in your study. Okay, so if your methodology is such that it's confusing and people don't really understand how your study was conducted, then it means that your paper is going to be rejected. So order of the methodology. So usually begins with the research local, and then the sample and population, and then the survey of experiments done, okay, giving information on the dates and so on and so forth. And the description of laboratory methods, including separation or treatment you used. The description of the statistics or the statistical methods that you use, including confidence levels. Okay, avoid adding comments, adding results or discussion in the methodology component. In the methodology component. But let me say again that also cross-check with the journal, because from my experience, no two journals have the same style for presenting the methodology. Okay, what I'm giving is a general guideline. However, you need to cross-check, okay, the subheadings in the methodology. Okay, because most journals have different subheadings and they have different expression. For example, data collection. Some journals use data gathering. Okay, so you have to understand the cross-check with the journal and be sure what particular term and flow is used. Okay, so step 3, write up the results. So the results section answers the question, what have you found? Okay, so hence only representative results from your research should be presented, and then the results should be the results should be essential for the discussion. So what I'm saying here is that in the result you are going to present only what you have found. You are not going to include discussion here. Okay, so subheadings, uh, use subheadings to keep results on the same of the same type together, which is easier to review and to read. Okay, so in the result you can include subheading if necessary. It's not needed all the time, but sometimes it's needed. Okay, so you have to understand this. Okay, so you have to number the subheadings if necessary. This is not true for all journals. There are some journals that don't need subheadings. There are some other journals they need subheadings. Okay, so you need to uh, include subheadings if needed, because this is needed for internal cross referencing. Okay, and then you should also, like I said, you should take into account the journal guideline. So for the data, decide on a logical order that tells a clear story and makes it easy to understand. So you don't mix the data up. Okay, usually when you are presenting your result, they should be presented uh, in the order of the questionnaire or in the order of the research method. If you use a survey, I'm sure that your survey has different parts, beginning from demographic profile, which is part 1, and then part 2, part 3, and so on and so forth. In the same way, when you are presenting your result, you need to follow the same order, because your result, your questionnaire tells a story. In the same way, your result, presenting the result, should tell the same story as well. Okay? If you really use a questionnaire and it's just a research method, then you have to follow the same process, the same order as you indicated the research procedure. Okay? You need to follow the same order to present your results, to make it more coherent and easy to understand. So whoever reads your research method, when it goes to the research results, he can find the link there. For example, the first thing you talked about in your methodology was on the samples. Okay, so in your result, it means you're also going to present the samples first. So there's some kind of cohesion between your methodology and then the result. Okay, so generally this will be in the same order as presented in the method section. An important issue is that you must not include references in the results. So in the results, you don't include references. Okay, it's just the results only. Just present the results. Okay, so indicate the statistical test that you used. Very important. For example, mean and standard deviation, the median and uh, interpercentile range. Okay, so here, note something. Note something. If you are presenting mean and standard deviation, please make sure to include the numbers. Okay, include the numbers. You are talking about interpercentile range. You need to put the range there. So whoever reads knows exactly what you are talking about. So use mean and standard deviation to report normally distributed data. For numbers, use two significant digits unless more precision is required. So instead of writing 2.0785 blah blah blah, just write 2.08. Never use percentages for very small samples. Okay, so 1 out of 2 should not be 50%. So just write 1 out of 2 instead of saying 50%. Maybe you use only 20. Your sample consisted of 20 people. Okay, and then 10 of them said this. Instead of saying 50%, just write 10 of them said. Okay, it's more laudable than saying 50%. Okay, step 4, writing the discussion. Writing the discussion. Okay, here you must respond to what the results mean. Probably it is the easiest section to write. Okay, but the hardest section to get right. It is the easiest to write, but hardest to get right. This is because it is the most important section of your article. Okay, here you get a chance to sell your data. So here you get a chance to sell your data. So take into account that a huge number of manuscripts are rejected because of weak discussion. Okay, because of weak discussion. So you need to make the discussion correspond to the results. Okay, but not to repeat what is in the results. So your discussion should always correspond to the results. So here you need to compare the published results by your colleagues, okay, with your results using some of the references included in the introduction. So what we are saying here is that in the discussion, usually there are three levels. So the first level is what does your results mean? What does it mean? And the second level has to do with uh, what has others found? Okay, what has others found, which is similar to your results or contradicts your results? Okay, so writing the discussion, you have to keep two things in mind. Okay, what is the implication? What is the meaning of your result? What is the inference of your result? And then number two, uh, how does your result relate to literature? What is the similarities or differences between your findings and what others have reported? Okay, get this very clearly. If usually the result and discussion section are together, which some journals use. For some journals, it's result and discussion together. Okay, in some other journals, usually there's the results section as one part, and then the discussion as another part. Okay, so usually if the result and discussion are together, then first you have to state the result. The second, you have to tell what the results mean, and then you have to tell the connection between your results and then what others have reported. Okay, for example, I can say that the average mean for population growth was 3.5. Okay, this means that 50% of the people agree that uh, population growth is related to economic development. Okay, that is the second level. Then I'll continue to say that it could be inferred that most of the people believe that as population grows, the economy of the country grows along with it. Okay, in relation to this, Johnson 2010 reported that blah 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 blah. Or I can say that in agreement to this finding, Johnson 2010 also found that blah 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 blah. Or I could say in disagreement or contrary to these findings, Johnson 2010 reiterated that or emphasized that blah 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 blah. Okay, so I'm going to state the finding, I'm going to give the meaning or implication, and then after that I'm going to connect my study or my results with what other researchers have already found. What other researchers have already found. Okay, so get this very clear. So never ignore never ignore work in disagreement with yours. In turn, you must confront it and convince the reader that you are correct. So avoid statements that go beyond what the results can support. Okay, so these are the consideration. Number two, avoid expressions such as higher temperature at lower rate, highly significant. Instead, quantitative descriptions are always preferred. So for example, if you write higher temperature, you need to put into bracket 35 degrees Celsius. If you write lower rate, you should put into bracket, for example, 0.5%. If you write highly significant, then you should write the p-value, maybe 0.01 or 0.05, and so on and so forth. So you have to be always specific. Don't say highly significant and just leave it like that. Okay, consideration number three. Avoid sudden introduction of a new term or idea. So you must present everything in the introduction, and then be confronted, to be confronted with your results here. So again, let me read that again. Avoid sudden introduction of a new term. Okay, so you must present everything in your introduction, okay, to be confronted with your results. So what we are saying here is that in the discussion, okay, if there's something new which is not talked about in your introduction or not talked about in your result, you don't have to include it in your discussion. Don't include it in your discussion. So only concept what you have introduced in the introduction, you have talked about in the discussion should be included in your discussion. So we are saying here that speculations on possible interpretation are allowed. However, It should be rooted in fact, in literature, rather than just in your imagination. So don't just speculate. Don't speculate. If ever you speculate, then make sure it is rooted in literature. So to achieve good interpretation of your result, think about this, okay? How do these results relate to the original question or objectives outlined in the introduction session? So how does your results connect with your objectives? So in the doing that discussion, that is what you have to think about. How does my result connect with my objectives or my statement of the problem? Okay, do the data support your hypothesis? Okay, does your data support your hypothesis? If yes, you have to indicate why and how your data or your results support your hypothesis. Okay, are your results consistent with what other investigators have reported? Okay, like I was saying a while ago, you have to get this, that what other investigators or what other researchers have found. They should either be in agreement or disagreement with your findings, and you have to indicate, okay, what other investigators have reported, okay, whether their findings are inconsistent with your finding or they contradict your findings. Okay, you have to also discuss the weakness and the discrepancies. Okay, don't be in the attitude of trying to defend what you have done. If there are any weaknesses in your findings, you have to acknowledge it. So if your results are unexpected, you have to try to explain. If there are any discrepancies, try to explain why or why you think you got that kind of results. Okay, so is there another way to interpret your results? What further research would be necessary to answer the research questions raised by your results? Okay, so usually it could happen that your results will try to raise some questions, or you might have some results which may need further studies to be done on them. So you should also indicate if there are some findings or there are outcomes that you think there is the need to conduct another study on it. Okay, so at the last part of the discussion, you will need to include that. This is for journals which usually the discussion and the conclusion are together. There are some journal, the discussions, the conclusion and recommendation are together. Okay, there are some journal, the discussion is different. It's a different section from the conclusion and recommendation. Okay, so if that is what I'm saying here is if the conclusion and the recommendation are together with the discussion, then this is all you need to do. So you need to ask yourself what further research could be necessary. So in the conclusion and recommendation session, you are going to indicate this for journals which the conclusion, the discussion are together. Okay, take note of this. So explain what is new without exaggerating. Okay, if there's any new thing your study brings out, you have to just state it without exaggeration. Explain, don't exaggerate at all. Okay, write a clear conclusion. This section shows how the work advances the field from the present state of knowledge. In some journals, it is a separate section. In others, it is the last paragraph of the discussion. So this is what I was talking about a while ago. Okay, all right. So what we are saying here is that how does the present findings advances knowledge? Okay, so whatever the case, Without a clear conclusion section, reviewers and readers will find it difficult to judge your work. Okay, without a clear uh, conclusion, it's very difficult to judge your work. Okay, so it's also very difficult for editors to tell whether to publish your paper or not. So you always need to write a clear conclusion. Okay, you always need to include a clear conclusion. Okay, so a common error in this section is repeating the abstract or just listing experimental results. So trivial statements of your results are unacceptable in this section. So the common error or mistake that researchers do is that in a conclusion, they will just restate the abstract or just state all the results, which is not like that. That is not how to do it. Okay, so what you should do is provide a clear scientific justification for your work in this section and indicate uses and extensions if appropriate. Moreover, you can suggest future experiments and point out those that are underway. Okay, you can propose you can propose present global and specific conclusion in relation to the objectives. Included in the introduction section. So, like I was saying a while ago, don't restate your abstract. Don't restate the whole result. So what you are going to do is to highlight the main finding, okay, and the implication of the finding, how it fits in literature, how it advances knowledge. So that's what you are going to do for the conclusion. Okay, just highlight the main finding, the key finding, the heart of your finding. Just highlight it and then give its implication or how it advances knowledge. That's what you have to do for the conclusion. So you don't have to restate the whole abstract again because that will make your manuscript not correct and it's going to be rejected. So get this clearly and then just follow these simple guidelines. So your conclusion, you are going to highlight only the main finding and then indicate the implications or how your result advances knowledge. Okay, this is very important, so get it very clearly. Okay, when that is done, then you have to write your introduction. That is step number 6 in preparing the journal paper. So, in the introduction, this is your opportunity to convince your readers, okay, that you clearly know what your work, you know why your work is used for. So you need to convince your reader, okay, why your work is useful. You need to convince your reader why your work is used for. Okay, so a good introduction to answer the following questions. Okay, what is the problem to be solved? What is the problem to be solved? Are there any existing solutions? Which one is best? What is the main limitation? So the introduction, you are going to talk about, okay, what is the problem you are trying to solve? What is interesting about that problem? Okay, has anyone written about that already? Okay, did they solve the problem or did they not solve the problem? Okay, if there are some solutions, which one is the best? Okay, and what is the limitations in literature? What gaps are present? Okay, and then what do you plan to achieve? What do you plan to achieve? What do you plan to achieve? Having indicated the gap, now you are going to introduce how your study is going to fill in the gap by stating your hypothesis or your objectives. Let me say that for most quantitative papers, it is good. Okay, you indicate the hypothesis, or you state your research question, or you state the objectives. Okay. However, for most qualitative, it's better to just use objectives than using research questions, and because in most qualitative we don't use hypotheses and so on and so forth. Okay, so just state your objectives. If your study is just qualitative, okay, it's very simple as that. Okay, so write a compelling introduction. So editors like to see that you have provided a perspective which is consistent to the nature of the journal. Okay, consistent to the nature of the journal. There are some journal, they are going to actually tell you how you need to write the introduction, what needs to be included. So also cross-check with your journal, okay, how they want their introduction to look like. So you need to introduce the main scientific publication on which your work is based, okay? There are some journals that will ask you to add the theoretical framework. So after your objectives, you are going to write the theoretical framework, okay? So it will begin like why you think, what is your study about, why it's interesting, and then you move on to what others have already done, what studies have been conducted which is similar to your study, okay, what others have said. Okay, then after that you are going to indicate the research gap. Okay, after you indicate the research gap, then you are going to tell how you are going to fill in the gap by telling about your research and then the objectives of your research. When that is done, if your study, if the journal is trying to ask you, is asking you to give the basis of your theoretical basis or conceptual framework, then after that you are going to give the theoretical background in brief, like 2 to 3 paragraphs. Or if they are asking you to add a conceptual framework, so after stating the objective, that will be when you are going to add the conceptual framework. Okay. However, editors hate improper citations of too many references irrelevant to the work, or inappropriate judgment on your own achievement. So they will think you have no sense of purpose. So here it's saying that don't put in too many references, or just put in references that does not has no bearing in your study. It's not really related. Don't forget, we are talking about studies that are similar to your study, that connect with your study. Okay, so don't just add literature by just adding. No, not like that. Okay, so never, okay, tips for writing the introduction. Never use more words than necessary. Okay, just go straight to the point. Don't make this session a history lesson or long introduction, because long introduction will put your reader off. Okay, so we all know that you are keen to present your new data, but do not forget that you need to give a whole picture first. So the introduction must be organized from global to the particular point of view, guiding the reader to your objectives when writing the paper. So you can talk about global, national, and local issues, okay, in the introduction. but it should be very brief. It should not be a history lesson. It should be super brief. So state the purpose of the paper and the research strategy adapted to answer the question. But do not mix the introduction or the results, the discussion, the results and discussion. Okay, so always keep them separate to ensure that the manuscript flow logically. So that in the introduction, you don't add discussions. Okay, you can just write simple uh, implications. Okay, but I mean simple. Add your ideas together with together with what you are going to cite in the introduction. For example, if you write something like, according to blah blah blah, population growth improve the economy. Okay, so I can continue by saying this means that blah 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 blah. So I'm just adding something to what others have said, but I'm not making it into a discussion. Okay, not a whole discussion, but just adding some meaning to what literature has said or what other researchers have said, so that it will not simply be cutting of information and then pasting them, but it's be a synthesizing of the things I have found in literature. Okay, so the hypothesis and objectives must be clearly remarked, okay, at the end of the introduction. I have said this earlier. Okay, expressions such as novel, first time, first ever, paradigm changing are not preferred. Okay, so use them sparingly. Step 7, after you are done with the introduction, now you need to write your abstract. Later, I'm going to talk about the abstract in detail in another presentation. So over here, we are just going to give a brief report. So the abstract tells the prospective reader what you did and what the important findings in your research were. So together with the title, the abstract serves as an advertisement for your article. So make it interesting and easy to understand, okay? Make it easy to understand, okay, without uh, your readers having to read the whole paper. So by reading the article, they should understand what it's all about. So avoiding using jargon and then uncommon abbreviation and references. And then you must be accurate. You must be accurate, okay, using the words that convey the precise meaning of your research. And then the abstract should provide a short description of the perspective and purpose of your paper. So it should be a clear description, okay? They don't write an abstract which is not really talking about your actual paper. So it gives key results but minimizes experimental detail. So in the abstract, you are not going to write all the detail, okay? It's just the key result, the key findings only, not the very detail. Okay, so it is very important to uh, remind that the abstract offers a short description of the interpretation, the conclusion, and the conclusion in the last sentence. So the abstract is just a brief. It's just like the heart of the whole thing. So whoever wants to read your paper after the person reads uh, the person reads the title, the next thing will be the abstract. And then whether to continue to read a paper will depend on what the abstract is talking about. Okay, step 8, compose a concise and descriptive title. Okay, so your title should be concise, should be brief. It should be brief. It should talk about your study. There was one paper I reviewed last month for one particular journal. And then what I noticed is that the title was very misleading. The title does not really talk about the paper. So I did not recommend the paper for publication. Why? Because the title is really different. So one of my recommendation was to rephrase the title or to reconstruct the title. The title should be based on the paper, okay, like that. So let's get this very clearly. So usually the editor is going to read your title first. And if he doesn't like the title, he will not continue to read the paper. And any other person who will read the paper, like the reviewers, or even if your paper is online, if your title is not well written, then people will not bother to read the paper. Because you agree with me that if you go online, if you read a title and you don't understand the title, you are not going to proceed, okay, to read the entire paper. Okay, so there are so many papers on the internet, and that is why you need to write your title well so that people will like the title and then they will read your title. Usually the title should not be more than 15 words, okay, for journal paper publication. And even in most universities today, it's advised that you reduce your title to at most 15 words only. Okay, so hence keep the title informative, concise, and clear. Keep it concise and clear. Avoid jargon, technical uh, jargon, and abbreviations. Don't add abbreviations. Don't add jargon in the title, okay? Anything which does not directly speak about your paper or your research, you have to remove them. Unnecessary adjectives, adverbs, and so on and so forth. Just remove them. So your title should be attractive as much as possible. Your title should be attractive as much as possible. If you can, always discuss your title with your co-authors, okay, or your workmates, your colleagues. Let them check is the title okay. Last week there is one teacher from my previous workplace who sent the title to me. He's writing the PhD dissertation, and then he sent the title for me to check. I checked, it was not okay. So I rewrote the title for him. Okay, and he was very thankful for that. Okay, step number 9, select your keywords. Remember, keywords are very important for indexing. Okay, so choose keywords which are related or which are based on your paper, on your manuscript, or on your study. Very important. Okay, so you should also cross-check with your journal, because there are some journals you cannot use keywords that are the same with the journal name or which are found in the title. Okay, so get this very clearly. So you need to cross-check with your journal to be sure. Okay, for example, the journal Soil Biology and Biochemistry requires that the word soil not be selected as keyword, because the journal's name is Soil Biology. So we don't want you to use soil as a keyword. So it means you have to choose another keyword. Okay, so cross-check with the journal guideline. Cross-check with the journal guideline. It's always very, very important. Okay, all right. So don't use abbreviations in the keyword, except the abbreviation is accepted in the field of your study. It is accepted. Okay. For example, if you say MD, okay, in medicine they know MD is medical doctor, so it's okay to use MD. But in, let's say, in education, if you say MD, it makes no sense. So you can use MD as an abbreviation in education because the meaning of MD might not connote what you want to mean or what you want to talk about. Okay, step number 10, the acknowledgement. This is optional. If the journal requires acknowledgement, if you want to acknowledge some people, then you can do so. But you don't acknowledge your co-authors, okay? Only people who contributed uh, in minor ways, not in major ways, okay? They are the people you are going to acknowledge. For example, people who offer technical assistance like proofreading, the funding agency, and so on and so forth. They are going to be the people you are going to acknowledge. Okay, so let's go to step 11, which is write up the references. Okay, in another presentation, I'm going to cover this in a little more detail. So typically, there are some mistakes in the references than any other part of the manuscript. And honestly, this is one of the areas that really gives editors so much problem. So, but the good news is usually presently there are so many tools, online tools you can use to check the references. I mean reference generator. So you just have to copy the reference and then you just need to paste in the web link and then it will generate the reference for you. So without any problem at all. Okay, so take note of this that when we say referencing, we are talking about two types, the in-text references and then the reference list, okay? And then we also have the bibliography, which I will discuss all those in detail in another presentation. But here, understand that every reference you use in the text should be included in the reference list. If you don't do it like that, then your paper is going to be rejected. Okay, your paper is going to be rejected. And then every journal has its own reference style. So cross-check with the author guideline to make sure you are following the reference style of the journal. And then finally check the following. Okay, check the author's name, the year of publication, the italics, the punctuations, and then make sure all the references are included in the reference list. Okay, so kudos. This brings us to the end of this particular presentation. So if you have done all this, then it means that your paper will be ready for submission. So these are some of the references I used for this presentation. So I'm going to end here. So see you in the next presentation. All right, thank you and God bless.